Welcome. This is Brian Harris with the Independent Black Voters on Facebook as we continue our series past the primaries to vet the general election candidates. As I said, folks, in these trying times with the things that are going on across the country, it is very important that we understand Black power is a three-legged stool requiring social justice, economic might, and our political agenda. Not the Republicans, not the Democrats, but ours. And when that comes to having our agenda, we must know the candidates. We must know who is running for the state assembly. We must know who are running for the school boards. We must know who is running for the judges. We were fortunate enough in the primary to vet almost 30 judges. We looked at them, we evaluated them, we vetted them, and we endorsed them. We're happy to say that 16 of the 24 candidates that we endorsed made it through to the general election and actually won and went straight to winning. So that's a pretty good record, I believe. Today, we've invited Judge Johnson to come on here. He is a sitting judge. It is up for re-election. I know a little bit about him. He has been involved with the Shepherd's Breakfast for a continual basis. So I know a little bit about him more than I know about some of the other candidates. But without any further ado, I want to welcome Judge Johnson. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we thank you for taking the time to come on. Please speak up because we want to make sure people can hear you when we do this. So, Judge Johnson, obviously this is a re-election year. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about you. We want to know a little bit about you. We want to know about your values and beliefs. We want you to give us a little overview of what your actually position does, and we'll take it from there. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, as you said, my name is Eric Johnson. I am the district court judge representing this county in Department 20 for the 8th Judicial District Court. In that position, as I like to say, my primary job is handling criminal and civil jury trials and litigation. I was initially appointed by Governor Sandoval in May of 2015 after a retirement by one of the members on the court, and I ran for retention in 2016 and was elected by the voters here in Clark County. As I said, district court judge is a judge that handles criminal and civil jury trials. And I believe my work as a prosecutor and litigator for about 32 years prior to me coming onto the bench, and my work since coming onto the bench has uniquely qualified me to be a judge and to serve this county. Prior to my appointment on the bench, I was for about 32 years an attorney with the United States Department of Justice, originally as a special attorney in its organized crime and racketeering program, and then as an assistant United States attorney here in the District of Nevada, for the most part in the organized crime strike force program here in the area. The last 2 years I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was the criminal chief for the state. During my time working in the strike force as a supervisor and with the criminal division, I tried to champion initiatives which brought the United States Attorney's Office here in Nevada together with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies to more effectively prosecute and keep guns out of the hands of violent criminals and drug traffickers, to target and prosecute the leadership and most violent members of street and white supremacist prison gangs, and to successfully indict child exploitation cases involving child pornography and the trafficking of children for prostitution. As a supervisor with the U.S. Department of Justice, I had a top secret clearance needed to work with the Joint Terrorism Task Force and with Russian and Eastern European organized crime initiatives. During my time with the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was twice honored with the Department of Justice Director's Award as one of the nation's top prosecutors, and I received commendations from the Tokyo Public Prosecutor's Office and the Ministry of Public Safety from the People's Republic of China for my work with multi-million-dollar money laundering prosecutions. Before coming onto the bench, I was also an instructor regularly of trial advocacy and strategy at the Department of Justice National Advocacy Center, and I was a frequent presenter on criminal law and litigation throughout the United States and with foreign law enforcement programs. I taught ethics and professional responsibility at the Boyd School of Law for several years as an adjunct professor. Since coming onto the bench, I was selected in mid-2017 as one of the first 4 judges for the court's homicide panel responsible for the trial of all murder cases. I served on this panel until about mid-2018 when I asked to return to a half civil, half criminal docket. Subsequently was elected this year in 2020 as the 8th Judicial District Court's civil criminal judge representative to the Judicial Council for the state of Nevada. This is an administrative arm of the court responsible for developing policies for the improvement of the court system and making recommendations to the Nevada Supreme Court. I've handled numerous criminal and civil trials since coming on to the bench. These trials have included, sometimes in the civil context, hundreds of millions of dollars in damage claims, and I've also been involved with criminal trials such as first-degree murder cases. It's from this experience that I feel that I do provide some really unique and valuable assets to the court. I also feel that my work has also given me a deep understanding of what litigants, witnesses, victims of crime go through in terms of the justice system. I have worked with literally almost every aspect of this community between my federal work and my state judge work. And in that regard, I have tried and made a sincere effort to learn about the motivations and concerns of all aspects of our community. As you noted, I've been a frequent attendee at the Shepherd's Breakfast. I also worked quite a bit with the Asian American community when I was the strike force chief, trying to get them to work more with law enforcement and to have a greater trust and work with the FBI and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I've tried to, when I became criminal chief, I brought the office in as an active participating member in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Multicultural Advisory Committee, which brings various members of the African American community, the Indian community, Sikh community, Muslim community, ACLU, NAACP, Anti-Defamation League together on a regular basis. And I've tried to continue to participate in that since coming onto the bench. I think this is important in order to get a feel for the community and in determining my work as a judge. From a personal perspective, I've been married for 33 years to a woman who has been here in Clark County since November of 1963. We have 2 wonderful daughters who are grown now and living actually in the Kansas City, Missouri area. But our time here, we spent countless hours at school functions, and participating and watching sporting events and assisting out at the school. I've also been active with my church and with Bobby and Sandy Ellis in their efforts to provide shoes and toys to children at Asterisk Elementary School. So I have been very conscious of my role as a litigator and as a judge, but also conscious of my role as a member of this community. This is where I lived since 1984, and my hope and goal is to continue to work here to improve it.
Well, thank you. Very introduction. As I said, one thing I can say is, as far as Judge Johnson, we have some history from the Shepherd's Breakfast. I can say he has come in there to the Black community to listen. He's invited them into his courtroom to see what is going on, and he has taken counsel. So I give you a lot of attaboys at the beginning of this, because unlike a lot of the other judges, I do know a little bit more about your history than regularly I do. So we're going to talk a little bit. Again, I appreciate your extensive telling us who you are, what you've done. I want to talk a little bit. Today, obviously, we in America are very dysfunctional. We have a lot of problems across the country, and a lot of it goes directly to systemic racism. A lot of it goes to the belief that our judicial system and our economic systems are rigged, and rigged into the way that Black folks do not get fair and equal treatment, both in the judicial system and in the economic opportunities that present themselves to the communities. What's your thought on that? What's your beliefs as far as the judicial system, where it is today, where it needs to make improvements? what's your take on this whole issue right now of the whole systemic racism, which is more than just the judicial system, it is also the economic system?
Well, I think the economic system in it, there are systemic factors which are precluding blacks from achieving equality with whites or in others, some of the other ethnic groups. And this plays a very key role in how it impacts on the black community in the judicial system. Almost all the time when I go into a court and deal with criminal defendants, I would say 75% of the time, there's a drug issue that's involved. And that drug issue seems to frequently lead to employment or other concerns. If there isn't a drug issue, there's usually concerns in terms of getting employment. People have prior criminal records, and I think that impacts significantly on getting them employment. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you can't get a job, or you have trouble getting a job, or you fail to get a job that's going to earn you sufficient income, crime becomes an option. I remember once sitting with an FBI agent and a police officer. And I remember the police officer commenting that, you know, if he had to feed his family and committing a crime was the only way to do that, he's going to commit a crime. So I see that as a very real impact. And I think we do need to expand economic opportunities at a systematic level. And then we also need, on the judicial level, to look at what we do with people when they do come into the system. As I said, 75% of the people probably have some sort of level of drug addiction. We do have a drug court. It's an extremely active drug court. Judge Ellsworth works that court very, very hard. But our resources are fairly limited. If we need a situation in which somebody needs to go into an inpatient treatment facility, sometimes the wait for something like that can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Same thing with mental health court. We have a mental health court, but those facilities are very, very limited. And typically someone may wait 2, 4, 6 months after being sentenced or required as part of probation to mental health court to get into it. So homelessness is another major factor that plays a role. So these are all things that, as I think I've mentioned, you know, when I've been at the Shepherd's Breakfast and spoken, that, you know, when we talk about the legislation and what people want to put emphasis on, people seem to be more willing to spend money on prison facilities than they are willing to spend on social services. One of the organizations I like to participate in and regularly do participate in is Hope for Prisoners, which provides re-entry service to people who are coming out of prison. You know, teaching people how to interview for a job, putting them in contact with employers willing to hire them, getting them a suit or clothes to make a good impression on it, and then providing a mentoring service for, in Hope for Prisoners case, a mentoring system for approximately 18 months. You know, that I think has made, if you look at their internal statistics, an incredible difference in terms of people not coming back into the system. But, you know, when I go to a Hope for Prisoners graduation and there's 25, 30 people there, you know, at the end of a month-long training session, I'm heartened by that, but I think about the 50 people a week that show up in my courtroom, and I'm just one of the 20 judges who have criminal calendars, and, you know, the services just aren't there.
You're right. And one of the things that we need to figure out is how to come up with a system that is not lock them up, put them in jail. Because, you know, it's great to have hope for prisoners, but, you know, as a black man, the truth of the matter is, when you have hope for prisoners, people who have those, they may have the opportunity to get into skilled trades or to do something, because of a prison record. Well, I want them to have the opportunity to do it before they have a prison record, so they will never have a prison record. So one of the things we want to figure out is, how do we fix the system so there are less incarcerations and more opportunities before the paper is put on folks? And how do we basically address, like I said, systemic racism? Because the other question that we see is Black America is, even when you look at the sentencing, it is very imbalanced and very biased on the sentencing. It seems like an African American man or woman, but specifically men, get much harsher sentences for whatever we do, versus when you look at everybody else, they're given more of a second chance. They're giving these opportunities that you're talking about to maybe clean up their act. And so how do we basically get more balance in the system? And this is specifically when I'm talking about Black people, African Americans, so that they are not continually put up as the example of tough on crime, and actually being treated with fair and equal justice, because that's all that Black people want. We are people who believe in law and order, but we want fair and equitable law and order. So what's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. In terms of the justice system, that's going to have to be done in large part at the legislative level. In terms of the laws, you have, as I'm sure you're well, I mean, you look at the prison system today, and, approximately 34% of the population in prison throughout the country is African Americans, whereas African American males only make up about 6.5% of the population. And a large part of that is driven by the war on crime that started in the 1980s. And that was a legislative approach that people bought onto, which now you've got even conservative groups that are moving away from that. And so I think you've got to take a hard look at what the laws and the legislature's got to decide, what it wants to criminalize and what it doesn't want to criminalize. And then the prosecutors, the DA's office has a tremendous amount of authority. And I know the DA's office has explored certain diversion programs, which are intended to give opportunities to people to divert out before they reach a criminal conviction. But I don't think that's used in a large percentage of the cases. But in terms of the judicial system, the judges, it really needs to be dealt with either legislatively or with the district attorney's office. Because once it comes to me, the DA's office has filed a complaint, then turns into an information or an indictment. And my role and my job is to see that case through to either a trial or to a plea or to an acquittal. And so I'm handicapped. If the state, if there's a crime that creates a felony and the state charges an individual with a felony, and that person goes through and either pleads to it or is convicted at trial of it, that person is going to have a felony. And I have an obligation to follow the law in that regard. I do have an ability, obviously I have discretion when it comes to sentencing. And I do spend a lot of time looking at the pre-sentence investigation report, people's prior criminal history, and whether the history suggests drug issues, whether they admit to drug issues or mental health issues or homelessness issues. And I sentence the vast majority of people before me to probation. And 2 out of 3 people who appear for me are generally get probation. And even those on probation, if they revoke, probably fit close to 57 to 60% of the time, I give them a second shot on probation. It doesn't make sense for someone who's stealing a computer from Walmart in their pants which may be worth $900, to sentence them to prison at a rate of $140 to $160 a day, and not deal with the underlying problem, which more likely than not in those cases is narcotics addiction.
Yep. Narcotics addiction, or basically wealth inequality, and that's it's funny because they all go together. And I appreciate you bringing up something, and I'm gonna kind of deviate and come back. One of the reasons that we are vetting out the judges because they are in the election, but folks, the district attorney is very powerful. And if we don't start to look at what is going on in the district attorney, if we don't make sure that we vote in district attorneys who are serious about fair and equal justice under the law, then we have judges who have to follow the recommendations of the district attorney. And I say that because the district attorney is not running right now, but he will be. And we need to look at the record. We need to hold them accountable. We need to make sure that as a community, we vet them and we vote for those who believe and exhibit fair and equal justice, because that's where it starts, is the district attorney. I'm gonna jump back now. I had to put that commentary. Like I said, Judge Johnson, we do have some history. I do know that you try to be very fair and consistent. I know you have a lot of history. So we're gonna go talk a little bit about what's going on today and get your opinion on a few things. Now, a lot of people, right now we're dealing with Black Lives Matter. You hear a lot of people say, well, all lives matter. Well, we say in the Black community, when Black lives matter, all lives matter. We believe that all lives matter, but we believe that disproportionately that there are things that are going on that are disproportionately affecting the Black community. Our government should not have a free hand at how they treat African Americans for minor offenses. We should not be killed for simply living. So there is a big movement here, Black Lives Matter. And I state this and I say this: when Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. What is your thought on that statement I just said?
No, I agree with that. I think that is a correct summary of the philosophy of the movement. Black lives matter. And in saying Black Lives Matter, I don't think the Black community in any way is saying that only Black lives matter or other lives don't matter. But they're saying we have some real concerns with systemic racism, which is precluding us at a economic level and in large part in a judicial level from having our lives matter as much as everybody else. You know, I saw a very good sort of analogy of, you know, when we don't all say all of our homes matter, when one home in a neighborhood is burning. We are concerned with that one home. It doesn't mean other homes aren't important, but we've got a problem with that home, and we need to work as a community, as a neighborhood, to deal with it. So yes, Black Lives Matter. I don't consider that so much a political statement as a simple human rights statement. Black Lives Matter. The concerns with systemic racism need to be talked about. And I support the peaceful protests that have been going on. I'll be frank, I don't support violence or looting. I know there are some who argue that that brings home the point perhaps better, but I don't find that, I don't support that. And I generally have found those who are subject to violence and looting frequently are the people that the supposed protest is supposedly trying to protect and promote. But I do think the tremendous protests that have gone on in hundreds of American cities through all racial groups has brought on a very significant awareness of the issue. Polls indicate awareness of the issue, and it's something that has to be discussed. Until you discuss it, you never can solve it.
You're 100% right on that. And I'll give you my take. As you say, I support more of a peaceful protest, but I understand, as people say, riots are the voice of the voiceless. And many people understand that when we, the people, ignore issues to a point where people feel that they have no other alternative, I'm not here to judge them. I prefer a peaceful protest. I prefer that people will tend to listen, be constructive, and do the right thing. But I also, as I said, I condemn the ones that are out there just to be mischief makers. I don't approve on having violent protests, but I can say I understand when you are able to watch with your popcorn black men being beaten to death in LA, black men being killed in Minnesota, black men actually being strangled here. There comes to a point where people say enough is enough. And some of us do it one way. We protest, we boycott, we do what we need to. Other people do it another way. And there's always two sides of the coin. And sometimes you have to have both sides of the coin to make a purchase. So I understand what you say here. My hope is that we, the people, black, white, Hispanic, whatever they are, start to understand that America is only as strong as its weakest link. I say this a lot. They say by 2053, and it's probably been accelerated with the pandemic, that black people, they don't say minorities, they don't say women, they don't say veterans, they say black people will have no wealth in America. Well, guess what? Those who don't have will take. Guess what? Disproportionately, black people will be homeless. Disproportionately, black people will be living in a system where they have absolutely no voice. And if we, the people, and I'm talking about the judicial system, I'm talking about the business system, does not wake up and say, I am my brother's keeper, this is wrong, we need to fix this now, then we're headed for what I call Hunger Games. We're headed for something that we as Americans do not want to deal with. We have to deal with systemic racism. We have to deal with wealth inequality. And wealth inequality is not just in the black community. It's across this country right now. We have a major problem. It's just that, as people now like to say, when America gets a cold, black people get pneumonia. Well, that's the situation we're in right now. And having the right judicial people there, having the right state assembly here, having the right judges, senators, and presidents will determine whether or not we change the trajectory or not to zero by 2053. So that's my commentary. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to now thank you, Judge Johnson. We're going to have some other talks. I'm hoping to sit down and have more talks. I encourage you to go on the Independent Black Voters and give people a minute rant. Let them know who you are, because that's what it's created for. If you don't take advantage of it, shame on you. But I thank you. Now I'm going to ask you to give me your little spiel on why you think you are the best candidate to basically be reelected during the general elections.
I think I've hit on most of my points during our time here together. I think I am the best candidate because I bring a tremendous amount of litigation experience, both prosecuting really complex criminal cases. I handled RICO cases, terrorism cases, public corruption cases, large-scale money laundering cases on both a national and international level. And since coming onto the bench, I've done, like I said, some civil cases that have involved $100 million and more in claim damages. So I have a real significant litigation background and grasp of what litigants go through, what assist victims go through. And so I think I bring that to the court. And as I said, our district court is our trial court. It handles our criminal and civil jury trials. And in carrying out that job, I have made a concerted effort, because I appreciate my role as someone who is dealing with the community and different aspects of the community as judge. I've made a concerted effort, both as when I was working with the government as a prosecutor, and then coming on the bench, to involve myself in Asian community, in the Black American community, in other communities throughout the valley, because I think it is critical that I see the points of view of different people and how the law and our judicial system impacts them. And I try to bring that into it. When I hear a case, I try to, best I can, to put myself in the position of the parties and try to reach an equitable decision to them. I know that the law isn't just like a computer where you throw some facts into it and an answer comes out. It involves real people. Injustice causes real harm if it occurs. And my goal as a judge is to be fair, to be unbiased, and to improve and bring trust to our justice system. And that's my goal, and that's what I try to do on a daily basis. And I think I will continue to do that if reelected in the general election this fall.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I said, Judge Johnson, we will be doing some more vetting, some more interviews as your time permits. We thank you for taking the time for the independent Black voters, because our vote is not free. Folks, if we aren't asking the right questions when we get the opportunity to talk to the people running, then we'll never know who is best for our community. I thank you, though, for the people on the independent Black voters, Black, brown, purple, green. All of you all mean a lot to me. If you're here to learn what's going on in the Black community, if you're here to support the community, we thank you for being on the independent Black voters. We thank you for taking the time to listen to our side of the story as we help for you to be an informed voter. In November, this election is very important. You must be an informed voter. You must take the time to know all of the candidates running and all of the different assignments, because it all comes together for us to be one nation under God. Again, this is the Independent Black Voters. We thank you again. Great day, great weekend. We'll see you soon. Peace.